What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We're going to take a look at Black Myth Wukong here running on the Ally X, some 1080p, 720p, 25 watts with and without frame gen and using FSR here. So we'll take a look at performance for all of that. Let's go ahead and get into it here. The first thing though, when you go to launch this game, you will have an option of whether you want to launch the game regularly or if you want to do it in compatibility mode. I use compatibility mode on Steam Deck for some better performance, and if you have trouble, you might want to switch to that. However, I had a pretty good experience here without having to do that. Starting off here, 1080p, no motion blur, no VSync, no frame cap. Graphics wise, 75 on the super resolution for FSR, and we're also going to change some other things. Now, if you want to come down, you can come down more. 66 or 67 will get you under where the recommended settings are, but I don't notice a big difference in performance here, so I bumped it up to 75 for 1080p just to look a little bit better, but play with that as you wish. Low preset with medium anti-aliasing, medium texture quality. Everything else low pretty much seems to get me where I want to be for decent performance here in the game. Something nice about the Ally X is having the 24 gigabytes of shared RAM, allowing me to have the 8 gigabytes of VRAM dedicated, 16 to the system, and pretty much a set it and forget it for now on a lot of these games. And it does seem to help, as this is one of those games that definitely wants to be able to eat up a good bit of VRAM and system RAM. Now here at 1080p though, even with the FSR, 75% and all of that, it is going to struggle a bit. You are mostly going to play this game between 30 and 40 FPS this way, with some variance here and there. And there will of course be some times where you're going to come under 30 FPS and come into the upper 20s. That's pretty much what I've seen when it comes to the first and second area and fighting a couple of bosses and that type of thing here. It's pretty consistent performance and it's pretty smooth performance. We do have some times where the frame times want to kind of spike or have issue here or there, but for the most part, running around and fighting and everything, it's pretty smooth when it comes to this. I definitely didn't have any problems when it came to like the input latency or dodging or anything like that. It's definitely playable. However, there's other options that I think do make it a little bit better when we get into stuff like frame gen and 720p, which we'll get in and take a look at here shortly as well. But I wanted to run around quite a few different areas so that you could see what the performance was like, and so that you could see that the frame time spikes or dips here and there are kind of not the normal. Most of the time it's fairly smooth in all these areas I've been in. Even some of these mobs where it gets a little busier, I do come down into those 20s, like I said, 29, I've seen 28 and that type of thing, but for the most part, these settings on the Ally X, fairly smooth, getting you 30 to 40 FPS depending on where you're at. Now, who knows what's going to happen in this game much further down the road. Hopefully, performance does tend to stay the same. I don't anticipate any big major changes, but again, with 720p and frame gen, we do have some more options. So let's go ahead and actually take a look at frame gen here on 1080p. So we're going to the settings here, and we can go ahead and change this up while we're in game. We'll come down to graphics, go in here to frame generation and click that on. We'll apply. And then we'll come back out here. Now we're going to bump up from 40 to about 62 FPS, so about 22 FPS gain on that there. And honestly, not a major difference in input latency. I can tell that it's there with this frame gen, but in-game frame generation tends to be a bit better than say like driver from the software or lossless or something like that. So it's pretty good. I don't think I would have any problems when it comes to combat or dodging even in some of the boss fights. It's pretty solid, but you will notice a small difference when you click frame gen on, especially at the 1080p. Now switching over to 720p here at 80% FSR, same settings otherwise, we get a bump up of about 10 or 11 FPS over 1080p in the same area. So again, 720p could probably be the way to go if you want to get those frames up a little bit here. And I do notice that with 720p, we get a lot less issue when it comes to some of those frame drops or frame spikes. There's still some here that happen, but they're not quite as often when we're at that 1080p. So that's pretty good to see here. That's why I think, especially if you're playing handheld mode on that smaller 7-inch screen, this actually works really well and it feels good on the VRR display, which is kind of hard to show in a captured video like this, but it definitely feels solid. Latency feels even better than the 1080p as well, just a little higher frame rate, a little smoother, and just all in all a little bit better. So probably with a game like this where you want the gameplay to be really good versus necessarily the visuals, because there are going to be some difficult fights and difficult areas, I kind of prefer the 720p over the 1080p. And I'm actually kind of liking frame gen as well, which we'll also take a look at here on 720p. But yeah, this guy does a lot of crazy stuff, and even at that, it held together pretty well. Frame times felt pretty good. no problems there. And running around with some of those same other mobs that we were getting, what, around 31 FPS here at the 1080p settings. We're getting in the 40s here with the 720p settings at 80%. So really not too bad there. So what, 40 to 50s with the 720p settings like this, and it was more 30 to 40, maybe a little higher here and there sometimes when it came to the 1080p. So all in all, really good experience, I think, especially at launch, considering I've heard some optimization issues. Don't seem to be too bad, at least so far in the game here for PC and running on the Ally X. Now, just like we did at 1080p, we'll go ahead and switch this 720p over and turn on frame gen. And this actually feels really good in this game. Again, I think I'm kind of leaning the 720p here and frame gen on with FSR. We kick up here and gain quite a lot over what we were on, and about 30 to 40 FPS higher in this area over the 720p without frame gen. Frame times stay really clean, no real stutters, it's pretty smooth, and input latency, while there, it's not even as bad as the 1080p with frame gen. It's pretty good, and that's due to the higher frames because of the higher base frames. But yeah, ultimately, I'm going to keep messing around with this and playing with it, but I think these settings at 720p with some frame gen, unless I start running into trouble later where things get less smooth or maybe input latency gets worse or something, this is probably where I'm gonna stick around for a little while and check it out. But you guys, there's some room to play here and kind of run it how you want to, even lock in some frames, do some 60 or something like that if you want to, or at the 1080p stuff, maybe some 30. But anyways, guys, I hope this gives you a good idea of how Black Myth Wukong is running on the Ally X with a few different settings and in-game frame gen at 25 watts. All right, guys, thanks a lot for coming and check out the video. As always, I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one.